The house at 14 Marrow Lane wasn't on any map, but it was all over the town's tax records. That was my job, you see. I was an assessor for the county, and my entire existence was a grid of parcels and property lines. I'd driven past that particular plot 100 times, a sliver of overgrown woods between two cookie-cutter developments. The record said a house was there, a two-story single-family dwelling built in 1947. But in the real world, the world of asphalt and streetlights, there was just a chain-link fence and a no trespassing sign so faded it was more rust than paint. I was the one who found the discrepancy. A routine title search for a refinance flagged a delinquent tax bill for the property. I was sent out to verify the structure's existence and condition, to see if the land was worth the unpaid taxes or if we should just let it go to auction. It was a Tuesday. It was raining. And I almost drove right past it, because the GPS on my county-issued tablet insisted the house was 30 feet to the left of the access road, directly in the middle of a dense thicket of brambles and oak. Curiosity is a disease in my line of work. You have to see things for yourself. I parked my sedan on the muddy shoulder and walked. The rain was a constant, hissing whisper, muffling the distant sound of traffic from the highway. The fence was bowed in places, but I found a spot where the bottom wire was rusted through and I could step over it. The ground squelched under my boots. It wasn't long before I found the foundation. It wasn't a ruin. It was a house. A complete, intact house sitting there in the woods like it had been waiting for the trees to part. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and most of the windows were either cracked or missing, but it was recognizably a home. The air smelled of wet wood and something else, something sweet and decaying like old flowers trapped in a flooded basement. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom of the interior. Dust motes danced in the light like tiny, suspended ghosts. I should have turned back then. My report didn't require me to enter the building. But I saw it on the floor just inside the doorway. A single green rubber boot sitting upright as if waiting for its owner's foot. Next to it, a child's plastic shovel, the kind you take to the beach, coated in a thin layer of gray dust. I stepped inside. The silence was the first thing that struck me. The rain, which had been a constant companion outside, was completely muted. The air inside was still and cold, far colder than the humid September afternoon. The living room was cluttered with furniture draped in yellowed sheets, giving the impression of a gathering of stooped, silent figures. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor, the sound sharp and lonely. There was a fireplace with a mantel, and on it a single framed photograph face down. I picked it up. It was a family portrait. A man in a simple suit, a woman with a kind, tired smile, and a boy of about 8 with fair hair and a gap-toothed grin. They were standing in front of this very fireplace. I turned the frame over. On the back, written in pencil, was a date. It was exactly 40 years ago to the day. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature ran down my spine. Coincidence. It had to be. I set the photograph down and walked into the kitchen. The appliances were from another era, a mint green stove and a refrigerator that looked like a tank. On the counter was a plate, a fork, and a glass of water. The water was clear, not cloudy with age. The fork had a faint film of something dried on its tines. I reached out and touched the glass. It was cold, but not freezing. The condensation on the outside was fresh. My heart started to beat a little faster. I heard a noise from upstairs, a soft, rhythmic thumping, like a ball being bounced. Or a small foot tapping against the floorboards. I called out, "Hello, County Assessor's office. Is anyone here?" My voice was swallowed by the thick, dead air. The thumping stopped. I waited, holding my breath. Then it started again, slower this time, deliberate. I moved to the base of the stairs. The wooden steps creaked under the weight of the silence. The thumping was coming from the room at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. My flashlight revealed a sliver of the room inside, a child's bedroom. A small wooden bed with a blue hand-knitted blanket, a toy box, and on the wall a series of crayon drawings. I climbed the stairs. The sound grew clearer. It was wetter somehow, a squelching sound, like a sponge being squeezed. I reached the door and pushed it open with the tip of my flashlight. The room was exactly as I'd imagined. The bed was neatly made. The toy box was closed. The crayon drawings were of a house, a family, and a big yellow sun, but my attention was drawn to the window. It was open a crack and the rain was getting in, dotting the floor with dark spots. The thumping was coming from the window sill. It was a Venetian blind cord tapping against the glass in the wind. I let out a shaky laugh, just a draft, just a house settling. I was about to turn away when I saw the photograph on the nightstand. It was the same boy from the mantelpiece. He was older, maybe 13. He was wearing a green raincoat and holding that same plastic shovel. He was standing in front of a hole in the ground. A new hole, the dirt dark and packed. He was smiling, but it wasn't the same gap-toothed grin from the other photo. It was wider and his eyes were flat like a shark's. I picked it up. On the back, written in the same pencil, was the year and an address. It was this address, 14 Marrow Lane, but the photo was dated 6 years after the first one. The first photo was the family in the house. This boy was here alone, digging a hole. The rain on the windowsill suddenly seemed louder. I felt a presence behind me. Not a scary presence, not a menacing one, but an expectant one, like a child waiting to show you something they've made. I turned around, but the hallway was empty. The air was thick and the smell of sweet decay was stronger. That's when I noticed the basement door down in the hallway below. It was different from the others. It had a brand new padlock on it, bright and shiny, a stark anomaly in this decrepit house. My curiosity, that professional Damoclesian sword, compelled me forward. I walked down the stairs and stood before the door. The padlock wasn't just new, it was clean. No dust, no grime, like it had been placed there today. I knelt down and looked at it. There was a small, faded label on it, the kind you de-use for a key. Written in that familiar, neat pencil handwriting were the words, "For Sarah." A cold dread, sharper and more acute than anything I'd felt so far, pierced me. Sarah, that was my name. My full name was Sarah Whitmore, and that lock was meant for me. I scrabbled backwards on the floor, my own breath ragged in my ears. This wasn't an abandoned house. This was a trap, a narrative unfolding, and I had just walked into the middle of it. The house wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by a purpose. It was a machine, and I was a gear that just clicked into place. I ran. I burst out the front door, the rain hitting my face like a cleansing baptism. I didn't stop until I was back in my car, my hands shaking as I tried to jam the key into the ignition. I floored it, not looking back. I drove straight to the county office and filed my report. I marked the house as vacant and condemned. I recommended seizure for public auction. I spent the next 3 days running every background check I could on the address, on the family name, on anyone named Marrow. I found out the family that built the house were the Millers, a couple and their son Thomas. The wife, Eleanor, disappeared in 1985. The husband, Robert, was found dead in the basement 2 years later. Cause of death, exsanguination. He'd been drained of blood. They found him sitting in a chair, tied up with a bucket next to him. The bucket was full. The son, Thomas, was never found. He was declared legally dead in 2003. The case was closed. A father's murder and a mother's disappearance, probably a domestic dispute gone wrong. But the details, the file reports, were what chilled me to the bone. Eleanor had been reported missing in the fall. The neighbors said they saw a hole in their backyard, a big one. Robert's body was found in the basement, but the floor had been recently repaired with concrete in one corner. I was sitting at my desk, staring at the blurry photocopies of the old police photos when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic thumping. I looked around my cubicle. The window blind cord was tapping against the frame. The wind. I tried to laugh, but my throat was dry. My phone rang. It was my supervisor. "Sarah, I've got Fielding here from the land bank. About that property you checked out, 14 Marrow Lane. We're putting it up for a sealed bid. But Fielding says there's some assets on site. Wants to know if you saw a family heirloom. A green rubber boot and a child's shovel. Says they have sentimental value." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. Sentimental value. Someone was asking about the items in that house, not the furniture, not the land, the boy's things. I told him I hadn't seen anything, my voice a flat, mechanical monotone. I hung up and stared at the wall. The thumping sound came again. It was coming from the trash can in the corner of my office. A soft, wet, squelching sound. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead. I walked over to it. It was empty, just a freshly lined bin. The sound had stopped. And then I felt a cool draft on my ankles. I looked down. A piece of paper had been slid under my office door. It was a crayon drawing, a house, a family, a big yellow sun, and in the corner a small figure with brown hair standing next to a hole in the ground. Underneath, in wobbly, childlike letters, was a single word: dig. I stood there, the drawing trembling in my hand, the silence of the office pressing in around me. The rain had started again outside. I knew with a certainty that felt like a stone in my gut that the padlock in that basement wasn't for my files. It was for a door in the ground. And the boy in the photograph, Thomas Miller, who had been missing for 40 years, wasn't a victim. He was a caretaker, and he wanted me to understand what he'd been digging for. It wasn't a body. It was the source. The thing that had given the house its purpose. And the lock, the shiny new lock with my name on it, was an invitation. The only question that remained, the one that kept me up at night, was whether I was meant to be the one who found what he'd buried, or the thing that was buried there, finally ready to be found.